early just to make sure there were no major difficulties, because there's sure going to be some difficulties, hopefully minor. But yeah, welcome to a Grim stream of Perilous lore. I am Dan. If you're watching this on YouTube 2 weeks later, this is every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. If you're across the pond from us Yankees, it'll be 8 p.m. GMT. And here to talk about Warhammer stuff, which I love. Talk a little bit about, you might recognize this logo here. I always forget which hand it is because it's backwards on the screen. Grimstream Perilous Lore, of course, is a kind of an offshoot of our actual play Grim Podcast or Perilous Adventure. We're wearing one of our shirts for it with the characters, Bruno, Carl, Lucky, and Mina. The best RPG characters, at least I've ever played with, for sure. A lot of people love them, and just kind of snowballed into this. A lot of people asked about lore type stuff. Part of our Patreon Discord channel and everything, and I figured I'd start. Why not do a show about it? I've got tons of free time, So yeah, we're going to talk about today's focus. Lore focus is going to be on the Empire of the Old World, which these guys are some soldiers of in this picture. Not Mystique. She's on that poster on the wall. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Empire. Not going to do that just yet. I want to talk a little bit about my first little segment called What's Gaming? And basically what I've been up to myself. I'll talk a little bit about some cool stuff I got for Christmas, which, happy holidays, Merry Christmas if you celebrate that. Everything else that's going on. Hopefully people got some cool stuff and can use it in their games. I did get some sweet new Click-Clack Math Rocks. It's nice gold and blue, which I think JB might actually have the same one, so hopefully mine work better than his. I did some practice rolls. They were terrible until Danny started filming it to show people in our chat for the Lost Omens podcast. Episode 2 comes out tomorrow. And then it started rolling hot. I was like, I got to be on camera to be able to roll decently, apparently, because when I'm GMing, I roll pretty well. Not as much when I'm playing, as Brennan in the Lost Omens podcast is more not so good a lot of the time. So a couple of things. I got Rough Nights, Hard... Put on this side so I'm not totally blocking the mic. Rough Nights, Hard Days. I'm really excited for the pub games chapter. Super cool. I'm going to tear out the pages about gnomes, because gnomes don't belong in Warhammer. I don't care what the writers of the game say. I know they've been around since first edition in the 80s. One of the early reasons I liked Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay was there were no gnomes. That was great. What's up, Dagna? Thanks for joining. A couple of cool things I got for the Lost Omens podcast, the Lost Omens character guide. Kind of give you an idea of where we got the name for it. My philosophy with naming our shows apparently is just taking something off the cover of the rulebook, right? Lost Omens podcast, Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure, 3 feathers. Yeah, actually, Johnny Trash. I have 3 feathers on the bookshelf behind me. Nope, this one. Somewhere in the Plundered Vaults collection for the 2nd edition. I actually never ran it, but I know it's another one that's been around since 1st edition. Super cool stuff. I've done the the Haunting Horror from that book a couple of times. I ran it just for fantasy, and I actually inserted it into a Dark Heresy. No, wrong hand again. I got Dark Heresy here on the shelf. We did that. We were running through the Harlock Legacy trilogy. And I inserted that into the beginning of the first book there. Yeah, the first one. It was kind of neat. Nobody was expecting it. It was kind of cool to go through this haunted house, and it fits the themes of 40K well enough. That was a cool game. We got through partway through the 2nd book before that game fell apart, so that was actually pretty good for most games. And then yesterday, our Secret Santa from our nerd friend group, I got the Lost Omens Gods and Magic book, which is really cool. Worked out really well because Dagna actually suggested that Brennan should probably be a worshiper of Iori, which isn't too far off. I think he's going to really, not outwardly worship, but he will speak of Pharasma pretty regularly. I just read about her yesterday. She's pretty cool. She's like the judger of souls. After people die, do they go, which type of afterlife do they go to? And as a medic, kind of makes sense for him, guys that heals people. But yeah, that's kind of what I got going on right now. I think I'm gonna pick up the Clone Wars Legion starter set probably this week. I give that a shot. I know Tim is excited to play that. I think Big Chuck's already got a bunch of that stuff. I might be able to fit that on some streams or something in the future. Quick reminder: tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Again, we have the Power Phase on this Twitch channel. We play Marvel Crisis Protocol. Tomorrow I am playing with the Defenders. I got Doctor Strange, Hulk, Wolverine, Hawkeye, and Strange has the Soul Gem. So it's pretty cool against Tim, and he's running Guardians. He just said full Guardians with Star-Lord with the Power Gem, so I assume he has all 5 of them, which will be pretty cool. I'm excited to see how that works. I didn't like the idea of playing Doctor Strange and Hulk in the same squad at first because that's 11 of my 19 points. But I was like, who cares? If it works, it works. If it doesn't, I don't usually win on that game anyway. So we'll see how that goes. Really excited for that. Where's my phone for my notes? I forget what else I have a plan of what to do on the show, and I'm forgetting it. Oh yeah, the Black Library focus of the week. I want to talk about. Sorry, every week I'll talk about a different Black Library book, either one I recommend or don't recommend in some cases. This one is another one of my favorites. If we're talking about the Empire as our lore focus, let's talk about the start of the Empire with Heldenhammer by Graham McNeil. Yes, another Graham McNeil, one of my favorite Black Library authors. This is a really cool book. It was the first of the Time of Legends series. It kicked off the kind of like almost imprint of the Black Library, where it was all about like how different nations formed and whatnot. They covered Nagash. They covered was Neferata one of them? I don't remember now. I remember Heldenhammer was really cool because it was all about Sigmar's rise to power and his creation of the Empire, how he took over all the other tribes. He was a member of a tribe called the Unberogans, and I thought it really brought him down to earth. I mean, literally, because it's talking about when he was immortal before he ascended to godhood, and how he united the tribes, mostly to fight against orcs, which we have on the cover. Oh, that's the other one. Thank you, Bash and Malkith. Yeah, I never read those. I think my brother Tim, not that Tim, different Tim, has those. He was way into the Dark Elves and stuff, so yeah, I never got into the Malkith ones. I probably should have read those, but maybe someday. I tried to read the Nagash one. I just didn't get into it for some reason. I don't know. It felt too all over the place to me. It kept jumping from like recent past to thousands of years in the past, and I just didn't care for it as much as others. I liked Heldenhammer because it was more about Sigmar and his relationships with like his people as he became the chief of the Umberogans, and how he realized that like humans are relatively weak, especially compared to orcs. Like one human versus one orc, there's almost no chance, just straight up. So he was like, if we unite though, we are smarter than them and we can do a lot of things. So he went around with his friends. He had Wolfgart, who was kind of like a big, not Norskin, but he was like a big like berserker type dude. There was Pendrag, who was like the Donatello of the group. He was super smart. He built lots of things. He helped do stuff with Middenheim. I think he helped design like the things that went up the Fallschlag. I'll talk about later. Instead of just going up the viaducts. And then Trinovantes, who has an awesome name, and I don't remember much about him though. I remember Pendrag being, I think he was my favorite because he was the smart one, and he would kind of call Sigmar out when he would be a little too barbaric. But yeah, this is the first of 2 books. The second one is just called Empire, which deals a lot with Sigmar trying to keep the Empire together. And then he gets a hold of the crown of Nagash, and it kind of messes with him, and it's really cool. And that one won a bunch of awards. But I want to talk about the first. I do this every time. Which way am I pointing? This way. I want to talk about this one first because it's about the founding of the Empire and creating this nation of people. So, yeah, I highly recommend that one. Take a look at it, and then, of course, check out the sequel, Empire, which is also very, very good. I actually think I like this one better because it's a little more action-packed. The Heldenhammer ends with the Battle of Blackfire Pass. Wait. No. It ends with a fight on the orcs. So we know in the Warhammer lore, Sigmar disappears after the Battle of Blackfire Pass. He just kind of pieces out and he's gone. And then he kind of ascends to godhood after that, or everybody, because Warhammer stuff is all about. There's a third part? I missed the third one? I thought it ended with him leaving. Oh, man, thanks, Bastion. I got to find that and read it now. I didn't know there was a third one. I totally missed that. Very cool. I'm a little behind, I guess. I mean, 10 plus years probably. I think this one was like 2000. No, I can't remember the date. I'm not going to even try it because I'm sure I'll get it wrong. But yeah, I definitely have to look that up somehow. Maybe I'll see if I can get that on my Kindle or something. I did not realize there was a third part. Very cool. I'll definitely have to read that. Thank you, Bastion. Yeah, highly recommend this series. I like Graham McNeil. He gets some crap for some. They are all trilogies. I thought it was weird that one was only 2, but I guess I just missed when it was released. Maybe it was like right after college when I wasn't as into this stuff. Yeah, I have to send me yours, but I appreciate that. But yeah, so I want to talk about the Empire. I'm going to go over the provinces. We'll see how they fit into the time since I'm already 10 minutes in. So I took notes, mostly using the new amazing book from Cubicle 7, Archives of the Empire, Volume 1. This was like a surprise, not a surprise release, but it was kind of a surprise release. They told us about it, and then like a week or two later, boom, it was out for PDF and pre-order, which was crazy. Really, really great book. I love it a lot. I've read most of it now. I did a ton of this actually this past week while at work. I'm a teacher, so we were remote, except teachers had to be in the building. So like I was at my desk doing remote classes all day, and half the time I was letting kids like watch a movie kind of thing because it was the last day before break, and I was reading about the Empire, taking notes. I ended up taking 4.5 pages of handwritten notes, which is like I might as well just read the book to people, but I like to try to put my own little spin on it and talk about things that aren't exactly word for word from the page. So this book was huge. I was going to use the second edition book called Sigmar's Heirs, but I feel like we play 4th edition on Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventures, so might as well use the new 4th edition material. Another reason this book is awesome, it added 4 new careers, which is the most we've gotten in a book since the core book, of course. We have a wood elf, like scout type thing, shadow hunter I think it's called, I forget off the top of my head. There was a dwarf one that was like a ranger type again. I can't remember the other one, but it doesn't matter because there's a halfling badger rider, badger cavalry. The best thing I've ever seen. The picture of it's amazing. I should have taken that. I wasn't sure if I'd be allowed to post that. I'm sure the cover is fine, but inside art, I think because it's available would have been okay. But I didn't want to make Cubicle 7 mad just in case they took a look at this for whatever reason. And but it's amazing. The picture is this halfling riding this giant badger that's bigger than the halfling, and he's got this crazy look on his face, and he has like just a cleaver in his hand. It's so amazing. I told my players for the podcast that whenever somebody dies, they have to make a halfling badger rider. It may have taken place of a rat catcher as my new favorite career. I don't know yet. It hasn't been long enough. Rat catcher has a special place for me because you get a small vicious dog, but a badger rider, you get a big old badger. It's super cool. So highly recommend this book. I like it a lot. It also not only covers the lores, the realms of the Empire. It has like 2 whole chapters about halflings, about halfling culture, different halfling clans. It has a whole chapter about the Moot, which we'll get into. Because of that, we have so much more information about that. I think I'm going to do a whole episode on the Moot in the future. Not the next episode, because that's for a super special episode for me. We'll talk about that near the end. But yeah, for the lore focus, I want to talk about the Empire. So I want to make sure I'm not missing anything here. And I found this sweet map. I couldn't find the source of this map. I like this one. I feel like this is a newer one. I'll go away. Cover. There we go. My only issue with this map is that north isn't pointing straight up, which we often see with these. Otherwise, the Empire doesn't fit as well on a landscape image. If anybody knows exactly where this map came from, let me know. I think it's a newer Cubicle 7 map, but I'm not positive. I believe this is... Actually, I have books right here. What am I talking about? Let me see if this is the one from the... No, it's not the newest map, but it's very similar. Very cool. All right, so what I want to talk about is some of the major Well, I'm going to go through all the different provinces, which, spoiler, isn't all the ones in red names, which I didn't realize until now. Places like Hockland and Ostermark are not their own provinces. They actually are internal provinces to other places, which I thought was really neat, and I didn't ever really know that before. Fifth edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle source book. It could be. I just kind of I did a Google search for a map of the Empire, and this was the best one I could find. And I feel like it looks really familiar, but I can't remember exactly where it's from. So I wish I could give it some um, give credit where credit's due, but I can't remember exactly. But yeah, I'm going to start with the Reichland because that's kind of the main area, the capital of the empire. The city of Altdorf is the capital of Reichland as well, the seat of the emperor, and also the home of three of the characters from a grid podcast of Perilous Adventure. So you can see on the map here, Reichland, in this instance, it looks like it's far to the south, but it's actually the westernmost province. It's bordered by the Grey Mountains that separate the Empire from Bretonia, and we also have the Reich that kind of separates it from other places, the river, which is one reason why it's called Reichland, right? With the river, the Reich. Reichland's cool because it has the most development of any places, especially for 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. We have, the Adventures in Ubersreich is another city in the Reichland. We have all kinds of cities have tons of development from here. For the enemy within, the first book of it, Enemy in Shadows, the classic Shadows over Bogenhoffen. Bogenhoffen is another city within Reichland, so it gets a lot of love. And I like the setting of Reikland. It's not as unique as others, I don't think, in the Empire. It's a little more fantasy generic, mostly forests, lots of rivers, huge rivers in some places as well. The Reich can be up to a mile wide, which I don't think I've ever seen the Mississippi like that. But in America, the Mississippi is our big old river that can be up to a mile wide at points. So I think the Missouri can do that as well. I don't think I've ever really experienced that, but it's got to be pretty cool. Potentially not see the other side depending on the weather. But as the home of Altdorf is the capital city where the empire or the emperor resides and rules over, he he's the. It's interesting how the empire is set up. It's not like he rules the Iron Fist or anything. He actually doesn't have as much power over all the provinces as you might think as an emperor. He's not the emperor from 40k. It's not like whatever he says has to happen all the time, always. The other rulers can kind of override him to a sense. The thing I love about the empire is all the provinces are their leaders all have a symbol of office called a runefang, which not only is a symbolic object that shows their leadership, it is also a crazy powerful magic weapon. in the tabletop miniatures game in the Warhammer Fantasy Battle, it was a 100-point magic weapon, which was your entire allotment for a lord choice, and it was a hand weapon that did not allow armor saves, and any hits automatically wounded, which was crazy good. The only weapon better than that was Galmaraz itself, the Hammer of Sigmar, which had the same rules except it also did D3 wounds to anything. So if you fought anything with more than one wound, it had a better chance of killing it. I love being able to play as the Emperor Karl Franz in the tabletop game because you could usually most editions you could choose whether he wielded the Reikland Runefang or if he wielded Galmaraz, and Galmaraz was like 140 points or something stupid, so that wasn't usually the way you would go because it was just too many points. Yeah, 140 out of like a generally 2,000 or 2,400 points you played with just wasn't usually not worth it. I had an Empire army for a while, loved them. Loved the steam tank. If you ask Taylor about the time we played against his wood elves, it was so amazing. He was so proud. He finally destroyed my steam tank, and then it blew up and killed so much stuff, including I lost the name. An Athel Lord, I think. It was a special wood elf character you could take that was cool because he could like fire as many bows as he had attacks, which normally wasn't how it worked. He could shoot a ton of arrows, and he could take like a Hail of Doom arrow, and he could shoot like 14 shots in a turn or something stupid, and he got killed by the shrapnel of a steam tank, and Taylor never forgave me for it. It was so great. I love that army. Sadly, I did sell it when they killed Fantasy and brought out Age of Sigmar because I was like, I'm never going to play this again. This is stupid. And kind of regret it, except I started an AdMech army with selling that, and I love the AdMech. I just haven't played 40k in like over a year, so maybe someday we'll do that again. Um, but yeah, those people that have the rune fangs are called elector counts. And I think the elector part is a little misleading. They're not usually elected by like popular vote or anything. Typically, it's handed down within families. A lot of people make claim to the swords. We'll talk a little bit about with Averland and Solland. We'll talk about probably near the end or possibly a second episode, depending how long this goes. But yeah, so elector counts are the rulers of their province, as they're called in the empire. The different areas are provinces. Reichland being kind of the first among equals in a way. Then we also have what are called Freiburgs. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. I don't think it's Freiburgs. Basically, free cities. A lot of them are city-states like Middenland and Nuln and Talabheim, which are kind of their own place to. They kind of govern themselves. They don't have to pay taxes to the empire, but they have to essentially fortify themselves with their own armies. Oh, that's right. The elector part means they're the ones that vote on the elector. Thank you, Bastion. I forgot about that part. Yeah, so they are electors in that they get to vote on who the next emperor is. And people tend to like Karl Franz. It's interesting. Unfortunately, I wasn't around for the earliest things with Warhammer. Apparently, in early editions of the game and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the Emperor Karl Franz was not like the consummate warrior that he became in the lore, where like he used to have rules in the tabletop game that he could just become like an avatar of Sigmar and his stats would skyrocket and whatnot, which is super cool. But they kind of got rid of that over time, where he was just kind of a really good general, not so much a fighter, but really good general. But I guess earlier editions and things, he was kind of I don't know what the word for it is, but he would kind of not. Now he would not take the battle. He wouldn't. He was kind of a weak emperor, but they flipped that lore quite a bit over time. But yeah, so he is Emperor Karl Franz the First of House Holsvig Schlosstein. That's so bad at these names. I'm so sorry, I can't pronounce it. The Grand Prince of Reikland, the Prince of Altdorf, and Count of the West March, the Chosen of Sigmar. So I love these huge long titles that they gave in the archives book for each of the provincial rulers. So I wrote those down. I'm going to read them all. I think they're great. I love that they're just super long. So the people of Reikland are the descendants of Sigmar's own tribe, the Unberogans. And they see them again. They see themselves kind of first among equals, even potentially just above everybody else because they're the seed of the emperor. They are the descendant of the people that founded the empire and everything. So they kind of see themselves as the big men on campus kind of thing. Let's see what else did I talk about. They had the most focus. But Bruno and Carl from Grim Podcast and Present Adventure are from Altdorf itself, our capital once again, and then Lucky. We learned is from a town within Reikland in the interview episode with Tim and Lucky. If you're a patron of the Professional Casual Network at patreon.com/professionalcasual, you can get access to that show. For if you subscribe at $5 and up, to learn where Lucky is from in the Empire. It's not kind of unknown anymore. As of that episode, we determined exactly what town Lucky is from. If you want to know, you got to listen to that episode because I'm not going to tell you here. But yeah, so I'm going to not skip. That's it for the Reikland for now. The next one I want to talk about is Talabecland, our largest province by area, and we're going to move just a little bit east of Reikland. And this one basically cuts a swath through the middle of the empire from west to east. It's almost entirely forest. It also this is where I learned doing this research. It also includes the internal province of Ostermark, which the way it's always shown on other maps, I always assumed it was its own province. It is not. It is part of Talabecland. Talabecland means literally the land of Tal, the god of the empire within the empire. Tal, that is about like hunts and wilderness and nature and all that. Pretty cool dude. But this is ruled by the Elector Count Gustav of House Krieglitz, the Grand Duke of Talabecland, Count of Krieglitz, and the Gratal, which means the beloved of Tal. Pretty cool. But yeah, Gustav Krieglitz, great name, fantastic name. So he's got his own runefang, the runefang of Talabecland, and these people that live here are the descendants of the Telutan tribe. And then people that live in Ostermark, one reason why it's kind of separate, the reason Ostermark's not a province is that they don't have their own runefang. They're not separate that way. They are part of Talabecland technically, but the people that live there are descendant of the the Ostagoth tribe, which is just super fun to say. I love that one. So yeah, this is the largest of the provinces. It's mostly forested, so Talabecland is really known for its lumber and lumberjacks and people with axes and that kind of thing. People that live in the Ostermark tend to be confused with the Kislevites often. They look similar to their eastern kin, and they're a bit more dour. Next, I want to talk about one of my favorites. Actually, you know what? I'm jumping around a little bit too much there. Let's scoot up from Talabecland and take a look at Ostland. So this is the northernmost province. Well, I guess Nordland is a little bit more north. It's hard to tell on this map, but Ostland is a cool place. We determined this is where Mina Fisher is from. So the city of Seestadt that Danny kind of made up, the lake town, is in Ostland. So this is ruled over their elector count is Hans Hals the third of House Tassenink, the Grand Prince of Ostland, the Prince of Wolfenburg, and the Graf of Tassenink. It's really hard to say. There's too many N's in that word. That's why I really have trouble with these Germanic names. My bad. Sorry. Ostland's kind of cool. It has the Forest of Shadows, this place that kind of surrounds the Middle Mountains. Which I thought was really interesting, that the Middle Mountains themselves are part of the empire. They're within the boundaries, but no province has like complete claim over the Middle Mountains. It used to be a realm dominated by dwarves, but they've all kind of left. There's a place called the Brass Keep, which in the Storm of Chaos story is where, after he was defeated at Middenheim, Archaon retreated to kind of hole up, and then they really kind of just retcon that whole thing. the Storm of Chaos kind of become the end times, which was another thing I really didn't like, because the Storm of Chaos was a storyline that happened right after I first got into the fantasy, and I thought it was super cool, and I loved the whole, like, there was a website you could input battles on. I remember me and my brother Tim would play once in a while my Beastmen versus his dwarves, and we could report the winnings like once a week, so we could actually determine who would win different places, and that kind of informed the story. We found out later just kind of determined who got the final hit onto Archaon, and because orc players dominated the campaign, Grimgor Ironhide was the one that kind of finished off Archaon. He kind of came in at the end. Archaon and Volton, the Chosen of Sigmar, were fighting, and Volton was kind of getting whooped, and then Grimgor came in and he like finished off Archaon but didn't kill him, and then he just was like, "Orcs are the best," and then walked away. It was like, what? But that was because people playing orcs had kind of won that campaign. Yeah, thanks, Bastion. I'm doing great with these pronunciations. Some of these I kind of practiced as I wrote them, and I was like, I'm not gonna get it. If people listen to anything that I've done, they know that I can't speak German or faux German, or can barely speak English at times. With the Ostland, people are descended from the Udos tribe. Again, very many foresters. They're typically short, stocky build. They have olive skin, mustaches, and clothes similar to Kislev. Again, because they're so far north and east, they have very close roots with the Kislevites, and even their clothes are similar, and they have a very stubborn nature, those of Ostland, which I think fits pretty well for Mina. Yeah, totally headbutted him. Grimgor has that rule with his model. He could headbutt things to make him lose attacks and whatnot. So super cool that they put that in the lore, or vice versa, because Grimgor didn't have a model until, well, the start of Storm of Chaos, so that came from that. Really cool. Oh, the Ostlanders mined the Middle Mountains for tin, which I thought was pretty cool. Little thing there. And they also have their own local god called Guavar, which is a bull god, which was really cool. I didn't know about that until I read the Archives of the Empire here. They have I love the whole idea of the pantheons in the Warhammer world, because like everywhere has their own little gods. Playing through the enemy within Bogenhoffen, the River Bogen has their own little river god called Father Bogen or Grandfather Bogen. I don't know. We just talked about it on an episode recently, and things like this. And there's the Grandfather Reich of the River Reich all over the place. So it's not like you might think, oh, they don't worship Sigmar, they worship some bull god. That's got to be like heresy. Like, well, not 40k. That's totally fine. Most of these people also worship Sigmar. In Ostland, probably more Ulrich than Sigmar, but we'll get into that whole thing as we go through. So being in Ostland, let's scoot around the top of the empire and take a look at. Let's go right to Middenheim as we're talking about. What's his name? I just said Ulrich. Middenheim's another interesting one where it is technically a Friedstadt, but it also houses an elector. One of my favorites, probably my favorite, the Elector Count Boris X of House Todbringer, which translates to Deathbringer. He's the Grand Duke of Middenheim, the Warden of the Middle Mountains, and Ban Ulrich, which means beloved of Ulrich. So Middenheim here is the city of the White Wolf. Again, Cubicle 7 just came out with a sweet source book about the city itself. Haven't got to dive into that too much. Haven't had time, but I will be reading that pretty soon here. I love Middenheim. I love Ulrich. Super cool stuff. But Nordland is actually in the province of Middenheim, which I found really interesting. Nordland, their leader is Count or the Graf Boris Todbringer. He has the Runefang of this province, and he's just awesome. I learned about him first from the Beastman book for like, I don't know, 6th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. They're the first army I played, and there was a whole thing about Boris Todbringer versus Kazrak the One-Eye, the Beastman leader from the Drakwold surrounding Middenheim, and the whole thing was Kazrak wasn't Kazrak the One-Eye until Boris Todbringer fought him one-on-one, and he removed his eye, and then they fought again, and Kazrak was able to remove Boris's eye, so now he goes around with an eye patch. Super cool. I love this dude. He's one of the more martial Elector Counts, which I like. I find it really interesting that in the new Middenheim book from Cubicle 7, the image of Todbringer, he's this huge dude. It's like, how could he fight? He's so massive. He looks like Grease's Goldtooth. But he's great. I love Boris Todbringer. The only model he ever had was from like the early 90s, and it's, that classic style of not being that great compared to modern standards, but his eye patch, and he's got the rune fang, and he's just awesome. I like him a lot. Middenheim is super cool. I love this place. It sits on top of what it's called the Vorschlag. Vorschlag, again, sorry for people that this language is, these names are derived from your language. If I am butchering it, I'm sure I am. I apologize. It's a 500-foot tall plateau. So I'm going to stop and think for a second how high 500 feet is. It's real big. Really cool. I didn't realize it's quite large. I didn't get the dimensions across. I know the crater that Talabheim is within is just absolutely massive. This one's not quite as big, but it's still it could be a few square miles. I'm not positive, but it is huge. Really big city that sits on top of this. It's considered impenetrable because there is no direct way to the top, except there are these 4 stone viaducts, big bridges that curve up those 500 feet that you have to ascend to get to the city. There are also all kinds of pulleys and things for people to have like seats, kind of like a chairlift at a ski resort, and it's just straight up instead. Mile across. Thank you, Bastion. I got my own research team here, better than Elite Eights. Thank you, Bastion. I mean, that's still really big. If you picture a mile, if you have anywhere around you, if you walk somewhere, it's a mile. All that is city, 500 feet off the ground. Really cool. So it's really interesting reading the Power Behind the Throne book, the third part of the Enemy Within campaign. Wow, I can't figure out my camera today. This is crazy. Takes place mostly in Middenheim, and it's really cool how they talk about like the taxes to just across these viaducts is crazy, and I love that about this setting, how like down to earth it is, where you have to worry about the taxes of that kind of thing. But I love the idea of the Fallschlag because the myths say that Ulrich himself fashioned this place with a great hammer and smashed a mountain down flat for his people, the Teutogan tribe that lived in this area, to give them a place to live that was safe and way up off the ground. Um, and the thing that's interesting is the Fallschlag itself is full of tunnels, um, but they're really well guarded, and it's been flushed out of things like Skaven or goblins or anything for a long time. They have regular patrols through there, and it's really the viaducts that people have to travel in and out of the city unless they want to take those rickety chairs on strings, which no way, I would never do that. I love the lore in the Middenheim City of the White Wolf book. There's like a 3-foot railing, like a stone railing, on these viaducts, like 500 feet in the air, and there's this little 3-foot thing, the perfect height to fall over, keeping you safe. So it said all the traffic is like right down the middle of the viaducts. Nobody goes to the outside because it's scary and dangerous. But yeah, Middenheim is super cool. This is the home of the worship of Ulrich, the god of winter, war, and wolves, who often is at odds with Sigmar worshippers because Ulrich was like the god of the empire. Before it was the empire, it was like the god of a lot of the people because they needed to worship somebody like this to survive in this area, especially the further north you went in the empire, the harsher the winters were. So Ulrich was like the guy. Sigmar himself was a worshiper of Ulrich, so they see a lot of the southern people of the empire as kind of weaker folk, and Sigmar is like a weaker god of the empire compared to Ulrich. Which is really cool and played up in that campaign, which I'm really excited to get to, in like a year at the rate that we go on the pod. So next up here, since we're in Middenheim, let's talk about Middenland, which is really interesting to me that I always thought Middenheim was the capital of Middenland, but it's not. It's its own place. It's ruled by the Elector Count Leopold II of House Bildhofen, the Grand Duke of Middenland, Prince of Karaberg, and Protector of the Drakewald. So this is between Nordland and Reikland, and between Nordland and Talabecland. Middenland is, again, mostly forest. The Drakewald, which is home to lots and lots of beastmen. When I played the beastmen in Warhammer Fantasy, I imagine they were from Middenland, because I imagine they're from the Drakewald. I had Kazrak, and I used him a lot, so I imagine they were like one of the big war bands of beastmen that constantly were harrying Middenheim. So Middenland was always kind of cool to me. So it's called Middenland because of the Midden Moors. We can see on the map just above where it says Reichland. The Midden Moors are kind of a swampy area, which is really cool. It's also known as the Mirror Moors. I've never heard of this place till I read this in the archives book. The Mirror Moors, because they are still as glass and cast perfect reflections, similar to the Dead Marshes in Lord of the Rings. And then if you go to the northern part of the region, there is an area called, oh man, this is going to be rough. I want to see if I can say this with my notes here. The Shadensumpf, the swamps in the northwest part of the region. Middenland is also cool because it is home to Laurel Lorn Forest, which are, I hesitate to say imperial wood elves. I mean more that they are wood elves that live within the boundaries of the empire. They certainly are not part of the empire. They see themselves as completely separate because they're elves and they are better than people. At least that's what they'll tell you, and they're probably right. Especially if you're playing WFRP, their stats are going to be higher than yours if you're a human. But really cool, this home of the Eonir, they call themselves. The humans that live in Middenland are descendants of the Teutogans and the Thuringians, which is a great name. I love that one. Super cool. So that is Middenland. What are we at? 340? That's plenty of time. We'll talk about a couple more provinces. I think this will be a multi-episode topic here. Since we covered pretty much all of the north, let's look at... Oh, I missed Hockland. So Hockland is interesting. That's another one that is not its own province, as I always thought it was. It is actually part of the province of Talabheim, which, again, for the longest time, I assumed Talabheim was the capital of Talabecland because of the similar name, the people that worship and venerate Tal so much. But Talabheim is another giant Friedstadt similar to Middenheim, and within this area, they also have the province of Hockland. which I assume is how you pronounce that. I don't think it's Hochland. I've seen a lot, especially in the British pronunciation of things. When the CH in the middle of the word like that, it typically sounds like a K. If anybody knows for sure, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to keep saying Hockland because I think that sounds better. So Talabheim, super cool. It's a city within a giant crater. Again, this was supposed to be in the mythology of the world. Tal, the god, another god. We talked about him a little bit earlier, mostly about things like wilderness and hunting and whatnot. It was said that he kept this place a secret from everybody else except for his chosen people. I lost it. Where are they? We said the same people as Talabheim, the Telutans, and he showed him to this place. And it's a crater with 1,000-foot high walls. So we're talking the Fallschlag doubled. 1,000-foot high walls, 40 miles across. This is the one I had definite numbers for myself. 40 miles across. This place is huge. And there's one tunnel. Oh, I got the right hand that time. One tunnel leading in and out. Again, they say it is impenetrable because you can't smash your way through the walls. It's like miles thick of this 1,000-foot high wall of stone. And super cool. It's a city inside the crater, so they are Friedstadt. They were actually the home of like a rival empire that tried to take over. I think it was the Attilian Empire that I think was stopped by Magnus the Pious, I believe, 200 years in the Warhammer past, on the year 2023 something. But Talabheim is really cool. It is ruled by the Electric Countess Elise Talrind von Krieglitz Unterlich. Really struggling with this one. The Grand Duchess of Talabheim and Ludental, which means Tal's shield, which makes sense being in this crater. They're super defensible, even more so than Middenheim, but don't tell Middenheimers that. Yeah, super cool place. This also includes the barony of Hockland, which is a very small barony. Not quite a province between Middenland and Ostland. Take a look at the map here. If you're listening to this on a podcast, you can just Google a map of the empire and find Hockland. And Hockland is known for basically two things. Wood, because again, it's all forested, and the Hockland long rifle. I love this thing in the tabletop game. I loved it. It never worked. It was such a cool idea. It was a sniper rifle in a fantasy, so you could snipe out characters. It was strength 4, which was pretty good. It would hurt most things on 4s and 3s. If you're targeting characters, usually a toughness 4, so you typically wounded them on 4s. And it had armor piercing, so it cut through armor pretty well with a strength 4. But it also always incurred a -1 penalty to hit because you were trying to single out one dude in a unit. So even though you had it on a master engineer, the dude only had ballistic skill 4 for whatever reason, so you're still hitting on 4s or 5s. It was I loved it but hated it because it never did anything. Because even if you did manage to hit and wound and they failed their save, it did 1 wound. So it was like, all right, I took your dude down by 1. He's got 1 or 2 wounds left, probably. If you're an ogre, well, why even bother? I love the idea of it. It just wasn't great in the game. It was expensive. I still took it all the time because I never play optimized things anyway. Super cool. But I got to read you the name, the official name of this thing. So great. So it's Leon Todmeister's fantabulously far-reaching harquebus of unforeseeable and unperceived bereavement. Whew! Which seems like it should be a lot longer name, but how long it took me to write that versus say it. It's such a great name. I love that guy's stuff. I think he also created the repeater handgun and the pigeon bombs, which were the best thing. Again, terrible in game, but such a great idea. You strapped a bomb to a pigeon, like a messenger pigeon, and said, "Go over there," and it would fly over, and then poof. It never did anything in the game, but it was super cool. I think for today we're gonna wrap up with one more province. It's already been 45 minutes, and there's still a couple things I want to talk about. I skipped over Averland in the beginning. Save this one for last today because part of my paper ruffling, sorry. Averland is where I had my army from, my Empire army. Originally they were from Nuln, and then I decided to change it once I read more about Averland, almost exclusively because Marius Leitdorf. He was the Elector Count for a long time of Averland in the lore until he was killed by an orc during a Wa, where the Emperor showed up a little too late. And Marius Leitdorf is the best. He's my favorite because he was called the Mad Count because he was completely insane. He was a nut job, but he was a dervish on the battlefield. He finally got his own model. I have it here somewhere. Oh, nope, that's an elf. Dang it, I thought I had it right there to grab. Um, he was a complete nut job, but he was so good on the battlefield. He was the only named electric count model we had in recent editions, such as 8th edition. I think he got rules in White Dwarf or something. He may have been included in the army book, but I don't feel like looking at it right now. He was awesome because he not only had a rune fang, which typically was just like too expensive to bother with, 100 points on top of an electric count model that wasn't that great. Marius Leitdorf had a paired weapon. He also had a dagger, which might be like, who cares? He's got a rune fang. It's so much better. Paired weapon gave him an extra attack. So he was the only Empire general you could have that had like 4 attacks that all attacks hit. All attacks that you rolled that hit automatically wounded with no armor save. And because of that paired attack, he had an extra attack. So he had like, he also had an increased weapon skill compared to other generals because he was supposed to be the fighter guy. So again, Taylor was my regular opponent. Taylor on Lost Omens as well. Also Throwlash Gaming. He does a lot of video game stuff like Minecraft and whatnot. If you want to check him out on Twitch, Throwlash Gaming. He hated Marius Leitdorf because I would challenge with him and he would wreck whatever he was fighting because he had like 5 attacks at weapon skill 5 or so. Means he would hit on 3s a lot or 4s, and any hit would wound automatically, no armor saves. And it was like, all right, well, he wins. It was so good. And it was so great because he's just so crazy. He was known for taking milk baths. Which, why not? You're an electric count. You can do what you want. He also, his favorite advisor was his warhorse, Daisy. So I'd love to play it up during games. Whenever I do anything with Marius Leitdorf, I'd be like, Marius Leitdorf commands his unit to march ahead. I don't know. Taylor thought it was funny, at least. It was so fun. And he was always awesome. You know, he had full plate armor, and he was on a barded steed, so he had a 2+ save. I think he had some kind of item that gave him a ward save as well, so he was hard to kill. He was the best. I love playing with that model. Kind of wish he didn't die in the lore. He got killed by an orc. Too bad. He took too much advice from Daisy while she was eating an apple, apparently. But the current ruler of Averland, we're talking about current stuff here, is the Electric Countess Ludmilla III of House Alptrom, the Grand Countess of Averland, the Princess of Averheim, and the Countess of Gaital. Not nearly as cool as Marius Leitdorf, but, you know, she's got her own stuff going on, I guess. Averland is, their symbol is the sun. They are one of the few provinces in the Empire that is not dominated by forest. I'll bring this up one more time here. If we take a look at Averland, we can see is basically bare on the bottom southern part of the map. It's not quite the southernmost province, but we see it is almost entirely plains. They raise a lot of cattle here. They are known for their cattle and leather. Not so much. When you look at this map, you think, oh, the plains are going to be the ones that make all the food. Not so much. The lands here aren't as fertile for crops as other places, so they mostly raise cattle, and that's what they are known for. Let's see, the people that live here are descendants of the Burgundian tribes, which again is just kind of fun to say. And I liked Averland when I played the game, partly because they're easy to paint. Their colors were yellow and black. So, excuse me once again. When I started with Nuln, my models are basically black and kind of a cream color was Nuln. And then I decided to change to Averland mostly because of Marius Leitdorf. Technically, their colors are purple and gold, but the general populace can't afford purple by any means. So Marius Leitdorf is all purple and gold, and some of the knights and characters I had were painted with purple, but the rest of them are black because that was like the closest they could get to gold to purple. Whereas if they were blue, they would look like Nordland, which I believe was blue and yellow. I'd meant to put all the colors of the provinces in, but I kind of forgot that, so maybe in the second part I'll look those up. But yeah, Averland was my favorite because that's where I decided my army was from. And it also was very close to places like Nuln, which I started with because I really wanted to make a more engineer-based force with lots of cannon. And I did eventually get a Hellblaster, which was kind of outlawed after long by the local gaming group. People hated that thing because I would roll really well with it. And I wanted to, I had it, so that was a cool kit because you could build it as a Hellblaster volley gun or it had like basically firework launchers, missile launchers, Hellstorm rocket battery, maybe. pretty cool. You could shoot these rockets. The only problem with that is that it scattered twice. So if you shot the rockets, and they would hit with a little template that was 3 inches around, and then it would scatter again because it was super inaccurate. So like it never hit anything. So it was like, what's the point? Hellblaster's way better. You roll 3 artillery dice, you get that many shots, and it just blows the units away. Super cool. But yeah, I think for the Empire, I'm gonna save for the lore focus for today. I'm gonna pause it there. Instead of doing my favorite thing next episode, we're gonna do the Empire Part 2 next episode. We'll finish up. We'll talk about what we missed: Nuln and Stirland and Sudenland and the Mittenland. So not as much. I probably covered more than half here. But I think I'm gonna do a whole episode on the Moot in the future as well. Just because everybody loves the Moot, Halflings, super cool place. I will say, not as a tease, but to let you know what's coming up, I was going to do Beastmen in the next episode, but that'll be episode 4. So episode 3, we'll talk about the second half of the Empire, and then episode 4, we'll go over my favorite Beastmen. The whole reason I got into this game. The first time looking at the rulebook for, I want to say 6th edition? It's probably on the shelf there, but I'm not going to grab it right now. I think it was like 6th edition. It was like 2002. And my brother was into it. He was playing Dwarves. We actually were on a trip, a spring break trip with our church at the time, and we went to a Franklin Mills Mall in Pennsylvania. And it was supposed to be cool because it was like everyone was exactly the same across the country. They always had the same stuff. And there was a Games Workshop store, and it was like, oh, they have games and stuff? Cool, let's go check it out. I was a gamer nerd. And I was like, oh, you have to build and paint them? Gross. I don't want to do that. Oh, that's like $30? That's crazy for a box of 20 guys. Wish it was that much now. My brother was like, I love these dwarves. I like Lord of the Rings. I'm going to do this. So he got like the dwarf book, and he bought a box of just dwarf warriors, and he was really into it. And it took me, I don't know, 6 months before I realized I did like it. I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll give this a shot. Let me paint one of your dwarves. So I painted a Slayer. And I was like, this is really fun. I really enjoyed this. I'll play this. What different armies are there? So I looked through that old rulebook, and I saw the Beastmen in it, and they were like the old 90s Beastmen, like the one-piece pewter models that were just, today's standards are just not great. But I love the look of them. They look so cool. They look like these little, I thought they were demons at first, and I realized there's a whole other demon army, which I almost played. Luckily I didn't, because that was all metal at the time. It would have been even more expensive. But I hooked on the Beastmen. It was the Dragon Ogres that really got me. Classic Dragon Ogres and the Shaggoth. That was like, I gotta have those. So that was my first goal, was to build an army with Dragon Ogres, as many as possible. Pretty cool in AOS. You can do that now. You can actually have a whole army of Dragon Ogres, and some people do that. They run like 20 Dragon Ogres with a couple Shaggoths as the leader, which is pretty cool. But it's just, I actually converted all my Beastmen to round bases. Don't tell anybody, because we were playing some more Age of Sigmar, and then it totally died off. So I'm really hoping I don't have to rebase them when the Old World game comes out. Who knows when? I'm thinking they're gonna, because it'll have been like 6 or 7 years since they killed Warhammer Fantasy, that anything from that old game you're not going to be able to play. I have a friend who was trying to buy up a bunch of different armies, so he had a bunch of different things when the Old World came out. But I have a feeling that it's not going to work like that. They're going to change something about it, so you can't just take your old army and play it there, because their business, they're going to want you to buy everything new. Which, if it's anything like the old Fantasy, just with more options, I take it. Yes. I've been joking for a while that I'm going to save like $5 or $10 a month or something until that game comes out. I haven't, but I'm going to get some stuff for it almost certainly, unless it looks like absolute trash, which GW's been doing a lot better with rules lately. I haven't played 9th edition yet, but I understand it plays better than 8th edition of 40K, sorry. 9th edition of 40K. Their balance is better. The first turn advantage isn't as crazy big as it used to be, where it was one of the big reasons I stopped playing that game, because it was like, if you lost the roll off to go first, you were playing a crazy uphill battle to possibly win, because you're going to get hosed that first turn with so much shooting. And now it focuses so much more on objectives that's not as big as it used to be. Depending on when you score objectives, it's actually a choice. Like, you actually have to think, do I want to go first or not? Whereas before, it was like, all right, I need to win this first roll to go first, otherwise I'm going to lose my 3 biggest units before I even get a turn. Stupid. I'd really like for them to go to a, what's it called? Alternating activations, like Crisis Protocol, like X-Wing, Like they did in an Apocalypse game. You did your movement, I did my movement. We alternated what shot. If they did that at 40K, I would totally play that more. What's up, Wargaming Dad? Welcome. So I really hope they go for something like that with Fantasy, the new Old World game. I don't. All we know is that it's on square bases, and there's going to be some Kislevite stuff, which is cool. Ice stuff, yes, please. But yeah, I'm really excited for that. I cannot wait. I hope to be able to use. I hope they have a Beastman army again, and it's not just like part of Chaos, because I'm not a huge fan when they do that. I want my Beastmans on their own. But yeah, what else we got here? So past RP. So this part of the show where I like to talk about things that I've done before or different games I've played, which kind of what I was doing, talking about fantasy in general. But yeah, I love it. Would love for it to come back. My big thing with 8th edition of Fantasy was there were 6 missions. And one of them was a Watchtower, so there was really 5 missions, because everybody hated Watchtower. And it was so skewed depending on what you rolled. Hey, Brush for Hire. I've heard of you before. But it's just one of those, if they just had more options for the game, it would be so much better. Taylor and I played and actually posted. We had a YouTube channel for a while called For Whom the Die Rolls, where we focused on, we tried to play as much fantasy as possible. We did some 40K. We did a little bit of Sigmar. Some other things like Underworlds we played a little bit of, but we did a campaign on there called Border Wars. Is that right? I think it was just it was a cool thing he got an app 4 years ago. I played High Elves, and he actually used my Beastman for that, which was super cool. They added a lot more options to it. There were different missions you could play, depending. It was really neat because they had like these tables. So it's like if one player chose this and another player chose this, then you played this mission, which was really neat. Except we always got the ambush, and I always got to ambush him. And it was just like whoever won the ambush thing won that game almost certainly, because you're always in charge during turn 1. My thing was I took a elf prince on a dragon, just because why not? Like, it's a campaign we're filming. It'll be cool. So it's a kind of inside joke between us, because one of the things you could choose was to scout ahead. Because I chose scout and he chose like full march or something like that is how we got the ambush. So I wrote on this little piece of paper, scouting on a dragon, which is just ridiculous, and I loved it. But you can check that. The channel's still up and everything on YouTube if you look up For Whom the Die Rolls. There's quite a few videos there. We just haven't done anything in like a year and a half because we were running out of time, and then we started the podcast network that kind of took over. But it's still there if you want to look at old fantasy videos. We played, I don't know, probably a dozen or more. It's pretty cool. Probably more than that, actually. Taylor did a couple games with some other people for fantasy we got on there. Yeah, a lot of cool stuff there. But this is the part of the show where I want to do like more viewer interaction. People have questions. I didn't get any questions like submitted between last week and this. Taylor actually joked on one of our local game store Facebook page. I shared the like announcement too. For a question, he just put, "What color is my underwear?" Because he thinks he's funny. But obviously, I'm going to guess white, but I don't really know. But as we go with this, I'd love to get more viewer questions. We could to kind of foster discussion, or just maybe like stump the GM kind of thing. What kind of things? See how far my knowledge of this thing stretches would be kind of fun. Things like that. Yeah, Johnny Trash, exactly. I had read that. He said lore. So Johnny Trash here says that you probably need to read the Archives of the Empire book. Lore of provinces seems to have been changed. I still remember Middenheim as the capital of Middenland and Talabheim as the capital of Talabecland. Yeah, I swear, I think that's what it was. But another thing I actually like this about the old world setting is that it's constantly changing. No 2 maps of the Empire are the same, and that's on purpose. The idea of that is that cartographers of the old world weren't perfect. So things were all over the place. They have a little bit about that in Power Behind the Throne about the location of the city of Delberts. And I love this. The idea is that there's different cartographers had it in different places, so nobody actually knows where it is. So it's like way behind on taxes because nobody can find it. So the fact that things have changed like that, that's totally on brand for me. Like, yeah, that's not what I remember, but apparently that's what it is now, and I'm going to roll with it because that's kind of how things have always been with Warhammer, and I actually really like that about it. That it's not the same as it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's changing constantly, which is good because otherwise the setting if you compare it to something like Galarian for Pathfinder, Galarian is really well developed for how relatively new it is. Like Pathfinder itself has been around for a while, but I know Galarian as a setting was around before that, more a good 10 plus years. And Galarian was around before that because Paizo was creating stuff for D&D 3.5 before 4th edition. They were like, no, we're just going to make our own game because it's so bad. And they were right. But I think that's important for something like Warhammer that it doesn't get stale because, especially as an RPG, I don't ever want to play a human. Nobody in our gaming group ever wants to play a human. Everybody's totally fine with playing humans in this game because of the setting, because of the gritty and realness of it. And we decided from the beginning we're just going to go with the rolls out of the book. And if you rolled a human, which you had a 90% chance of doing, you're going to play a human. So I think I like the idea that things change to kind of mix it up and keep it fresh in a way, even though the game is old and the world is old and things can still change. And some people might hate that, and I totally get that. Like if you're in love with a setting, you want it to stay the same. I kind of don't mind that things change or are reinterpreted and whatnot because it makes me want to learn about it again or change my understanding of it. This also, one thing I find really interesting is that Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition takes place in the year 2512, which is actually quite a bit before things like Storm of Chaos and End Times, because that was 2522, I believe, so a good 10 years. So it could be that within those 10 years, those things change. It could have been that in those 10 years, Middenheim became the capital of Middenland instead of Nordland, and Talabheim became the capital of Talabecland instead of Hockland. Interesting. Some ideas there. Some cool stuff. I want to say, other than that, it's 4 o'clock. My throat hurts because I forgot to bring down water, and I've been talking a lot. But yeah, next week we're going to finish up the second half of the Empire, mostly the southern part. And then the week after that will be Beastmen, Beasts of Chaos, my favorite. And then, yeah, I got a plan for the first 10 weeks or so, which I guess has now become the first 11 weeks. Why not? I'll go run through it real quick just to give you guys an idea of what's coming up. So after Empire's Beastmen, I'm going to do an episode about elves. We'll talk about high elves, dark elves, wood elves. We'll talk about Skaven after that, one of my favorites. I kind of tried to go a little bit back and forth between good guys and bad guys. Good guys and bad guys. And Skaven are one of my favorites ever. I'll talk a lot about the infamous Skaven campaign I ran in college with the Children of the Horned Rat. Book for 2nd edition. Yeah, Sylvania, I'll talk about that with Sterling next week. Bastion, thank you. And then after that is dwarves. Can't forget about dwarves. I'm not a huge dwarf dude, but my brother and Taylor were really into dwarves. They both played dwarves. I know quite a bit about them. After that, we'll do orcs and goblins. My another love/hate relationship I've talked about a little bit in last episode. We'll go into that in a lot of detail in that episode. After that, we'll talk about ogres. Another one of my favorites. I put them in like a kind of good guy spot because they're really not either. They're literally mercenaries that do whatever. Yeah, Johnny, sorry. I played High Elves, so I still have them behind me. Chaos Dwarves could be one in the future, for sure. And then week 9, or I guess 10 now, I want to talk about Lustria and Lizardmen. Super cool. And then week 11, I have Bretonia to kind of round out like the basics, and then we'll kind of expand from there. I'm going to put on my schedule right now where Gaming Dad Chaos Dwarves for week, it says week 11, but it'll actually be week 12. I'm going to type it in right now. Chaos Dwarves. Good old Dawizar. Love those guys. But yeah, unless anybody, I'll give people a moment here if anybody else has any other questions or any other things they want to talk about a little bit with our chat. After that, we'll call it a week. I'll say thanks for watching. Don't forget tomorrow. I know Wargaming Dad has been there a few times for, the Power Phase. The heater's making noise again. The Power Phase here, 7 p.m. Eastern for our Marvel Crisis Protocol. We got Defenders versus, I said it earlier, Guardians of the Galaxy. We're going to throw down with that and see if the Hulk can do anything. Or if he just holds an objective the whole game like he did last time he was on the table. Other than that, tomorrow also drops episode 2 of the Lost Omens podcast, where Danny runs Pathfinder 2. We're playing through the Extinction Curse, which is super fun. Tuesday is actually nothing this week because Mandalorian's done. So that either is taking a break or I'm not really sure. I haven't talked to Tim about it too much, but it might be the first part of our Final Fantasy VIII Remaster series on the Space Between podcast. Wednesday is Patreon Day. We got stuff there. That'll be the podcast version of the Grimstream of Perilous lore. There's also the second part of my own RPG called The Paul, where we're playtesting a rule set that I created with Tim and Ben from Lost Omens and a couple of friends that have been on other things, Chad and Logan. Cool, fun stuff there. Love feedback on that to help make that game awesome to someday put on Drive-Thru RPG potentially. Let's see, Thursday, of course, is Gapapa Day, Grim Podcast Perilous Adventure. This coming week will be episode 33, which is titled The Best Episode Ever. Which we said it at one point in the show. I think JB's like, this is the best episode ever. And I was like, that's the title. Done. Thanks, Dagna. I had fun with that. And then Friday is Elite 8 with Big Chuck and Tim. I think this week is something about New Year's, because this past Friday was like the best part of Christmas. I'm a little behind listening to them. I try to keep up with the other shows on the network, but I believe it's something about the best part of New Year's or something. And then Saturday's kind of the network day off, and then next Sunday, of course, is back to this Grimstream of Perilous lore. Will be every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. GMT, and we'll finish up talking about the Empire next week. Otherwise, thanks for joining. If you are enjoying this, you can always support the network at patreon.com/professionalcasual. If you've got any questions you want me to, or things you requests, you can always email theprofessionalcasual@gmail.com. You can check us out on facebook.com/professionalcasual. You can hit us up on Twitter at toptiercasual. Instagram is also theprofessionalcasual. What I forget? Probably some. Professionalcasual.com. That's obviously. Check that out. All kinds of stuff. I feel weird plugging it too often, but I have a YA fantasy book. There's a link to, or you can go check out dancoleauthor.com. You can look up Lainey, the Girl Without Fear, which I know a couple guys in the chat have read or are reading or have it at least, which is super cool. And thanks so much for that. That it's currently on hiatus, but there is also the Big Fiction Energy podcast. Wow, I really had to think because we haven't plugged it in so long. Where we do an audio drama version of Lainey the Girl Without Fear with me, Danny, and Tim, doing it with like voice acting and some sound effects and music and things like that. We go through chapter by chapter. We finished that for now. Once I get the second part done someday when I have time to write again, we'll be doing that as well. But right now that's 20 episodes of that, and there's a bonus episode on the Patreon. Thanks, Dagna. I really appreciate that. Such a cool dude. But yeah, so that'll be it for today. Come back to me next week when we talk about, let me remind myself what it was, Nuln, one of my favorites, Stirland, and Sylvania there, Sudenland, and the Moot, everybody's favorite Moot. So once again, thank you, and I'll see you next week, or maybe even tomorrow for MCP. Bye. I gotta click the right thing. Stop streaming.